Hello, and welcome to this edition of our Women in the Forefront series. I'm Becky Guenther, Director of Total Rewards with Raymond and our firm's Women's Initiative Network Chair. And I'm so thrilled and excited today to have a conversation with Stacie Kwaiser, who joined Raymond 27 years ago and is now the firm's CEO. Before we get started, just as a reminder, these conversations were really created to help inspire, foster connections, and give a unique opportunity to learn from successful leaders around the firm. And so I'd love to now invite Stacie to join in on the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us today, Stacie.
Thanks for having me, Becky. I appreciate it.
To kick things off, I'd love to just have you share a little bit more about you personally, maybe how you got started with Raymond, and what does a day in the life of Raymond's CEO really look like?
Well, again, thanks for having me. In terms of a little bit about my past, ultimately, I ended up at Raymond because I had started my career down in the Detroit market with one of, at the time, the big six firms, but wanted to get back to home, originally from Saginaw area. And so I started with Raymond because we were a regional size firm. And actually, I think we were about 200 people back in 1996. And so I wanted to come into a local area, get to know the business community. And I thought I could do that by joining a public accounting firm. No intention of staying in public accounting. What I had experienced prior to joining Raymond was that it would be very difficult to, as a woman, be able to balance that work-life integration, raise a family. And so I really thought I'd have to go to the corporate direction. And so ultimately, I found a great place that obviously my husband and I have a 24-year-old and 19-year-old. And I feel like I've found that balance of work and life here. So to go to question number two about a little bit about the day in the life of a CEO, I would summarize it as a lot of meetings, but it's not the same meeting all the time. And it gives me the opportunity to connect with a lot of people, both in Raymond and outside of Raymond. So it's a lot of different opportunities to meet one-on-one around the firm, meet in groups, as well as talk a lot about strategy, where we're heading for the future, what we're facing for the future. And in addition to internal meetings, a lot of external and talking to peer firms around the country as to what they're facing and brainstorm ideas for making this profession even better.
I love that what you said about not intending to stay in the industry and how your expectations of what your career might look like ended up being totally different. And that kind of leads into my next question, which is as a woman in the industry, what kind of advice could you give to other professionals as they grow their careers, and especially as our first female CEO, what are some words of advice or secrets to success that you could share?
I'd really summarize it in let's say three areas. So, the first is build relationships. It's really those relationships that have brought me to where I am. And the second would be stretch yourself. And the third would be lean in. So if you haven't read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, I would highly recommend it. I probably read it, 7, 8+ years ago. And there's just some messages in there that have resonated with me. So build relationships. I feel like I started to do that within the first week of joining Raymond. And, really some of the people that have supported me, some of the principals that have supported me in my entire 27 years here at Raymond, and probably sometimes believed in me more than I believed in myself. And then, along that line, stretch yourself. What's the worst thing that can happen is always what I ask myself. So if I step out of my comfort zone, I introduce myself to somebody I don't know, but want to get to know, what's the worst thing that they can happen? They don't talk to you? Okay, well, then move on to the next person. But 99% of the time, that doesn't happen. And then last, lean in, again, Sheryl Sandberg's book. so many times, it's the stereotypical, really female holding ourselves back and feeling like we have to be perfect at a lot of things before we'll put our name in. And so that lean in concept is really, pushing yourself, so that and stretching yourself really go hand in hand.
What do you feel like as you grew your career has been maybe a challenge that you faced or and overcame, and how did you overcome that biggest challenge or barrier?
So I would say boils down to two things: perfection and delegation. And so perfection being everything has to be 100%. And I grew up as an auditor, joined as an audit senior, and really, it's that detailed perfection. That's a natural trait of an auditor. And we have to realize everything doesn't have to be perfect, both in work and life, as well as delegating and trusting others and not feeling like I have to do it myself. Early in my career here at Raymond, somebody had told me, if you want to move on to the next level and you have a desired career path, you have to train others, delegate, and trust. And so, just like I had been given opportunities by others delegating to me and knowing that you'll stub your toe, I'll stub my toe, but they always had my back. I try to do the same thing for others as I delegated and grew through my career. So.
Yeah, I feel like as a leader, it becomes less about you and really more about, how can you lift up others and help them achieve new levels of success. Absolutely. And it plays into your own success as a result. Kind of along the same lines, but maybe a little bit different perspective. I I feel like boundaries can be such an issue for women in one way or another, both professionally and personally. What type of boundaries did you have to build to reach the levels of success that you've achieved? And how did it make you more successful by setting those boundaries?
So I think boundaries, before you set your boundaries, you have to set your priorities. So before I talked about perfection and delegation, you have to decide what's most important to you. What are the things in my world, I had to think about what are the things I can't miss, both personally and with my family, as well as at work. So, what are the true priorities that I need to schedule around, that I need to be at? And so that's how I then set my guardrails. And so, but I think what comes with that is where I started with relationships, because I think it's those trusting relationships and communications that really allow you to be successful once you set those guardrails. So you can't have those guardrails in your own mind and not share them, because then there's going to be perceptions of, well, Stacie should have been here on Saturday morning during busy season, but instead I was working from, let's say, Sault Ste. Marie because my son was in a hockey tournament. So, but if I didn't communicate that, I wouldn't be meeting expectations. So, setting your priorities, setting your guardrails, and making sure you're communicating them effectively.
Yeah, and a couple of things you said there sort of touched on my next question, which is around flexible work arrangements. So I know Raymond, even prior to COVID, before it became a buzzword or a buzz phrase, however you want to say it, flexible work arrangements have long been supported at Raymond, and not even just how much you work, but the where and the when. Um, Tell us how you feel that someone could be successful if they do have a flexible work arrangement, and why are you so supportive of those?
Well, to start with the end there, I'm so supportive because without it, I wouldn't be here. As I mentioned, 27 years late, 27 years ago, I didn't think I'd stay in public accounting, but I found a firm that supported flexibility. Flexibility isn't only how much, it's when and it's where. So it's all three of those things are important. And then I touched on already, you have to communicate them. So you have to have agreement with your supervisor, with your team members of when you're going to work, how you're going to work, and how much you're going to work. So I don't want to leave a misperception that we don't have to work. So, we have roles and responsibilities we have to complete. But if we can agree, which I did along my career, if we can agree that there isn't a defined where, when, and how that's the same every day, that we can make flexible work arrangements work. And again, I wouldn't be here 27 years later if I wasn't able to do that. And one of the things that I think is a lot of fun about Raymond is that we do stay on the front end of technology, because one of the things, and one of the things that I think is just key, especially 27 plus years ago, in terms of flexibility and where and when and how, is technology. Again, I was on the audit side, and we went from a regional firm standpoint, we went to paperless audits a long time ago that allowed me, especially, to work from wherever I needed to, based on family and personal demands.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of not being able to, progress or stay in the industry or do what you do. I mean, I feel the exact same way. What do you feel like are some of the greatest misconceptions of flex work arrangements?
So I think there's really two that come to my mind. The first one is you can't have a successful career path. And so, whether you work fewer hours during a certain time period, and whatever that may be, you still can have a successful career path. We talk about the lattice, and I talk about one size fits one for career paths. Now there is no exact career path defined. We provide guidelines, but if you want to cut back for a while, if you want to take an extended amount of time off, it may impact how quickly you get to that next level, but you can still go on that path. And then the other misperception, I believe, is that flexible work arrangements are just for women with children. Flexible work arrangements are for anybody, and male or female.
What are some other new or long-standing policies or best practices that really provide that support to those looking to progress in their profession, that promote that inclusivity and really help support people, no matter what gender they are, who they are, what stage of life they're in?
Yeah. Wow, that's a big question. Um, let's start with some of our policies, and maybe as we've grown to be more than 1,000 people, I'd say yes, we have more documented policies, but and more formalized. But we had, as I said, flex work arrangements. We didn't call it that. We didn't have them documented, throughout my career. Obviously, now we want to be more documented. We've got 1,000 plus people. We need to be more documented and more formalized. But flexible work arrangements, which obviously we've been doing it well before COVID, but it grew to a whole new level with COVID. And really, we all jumped, and within 24 hours, we flipped the switch and went to 100% remote firm. And so we all learned a lot about flexibility and how we can adopt that and adapt that in our life. And then inclusion. Yes, we've formalized our DE&I focus, and now it's led by our Diversity Action Council. But the core of that is inclusion. And so we're going to continue, and we have had success, and you can tell that based on our low turnover rate, that people do feel like they have opportunities for inclusion. And then as we, continue to progress, just like I mentioned, we formalized flexibility and alternative work arrangements and all that kind of stuff. Our training programs are another area that they really support the development within our flex work arrangements, within our diverse environment and more inclusive, are, really the opportunity to more express where you want to go. We're trying to really allow people a lot of different venues and opportunities to express their passions. And then our training, whether it be the new LinkedIn Learning that we put out there, and just so many different things. And then last thing I'll add is our community. So as we've worked on this, having more fully remote employees, having more hybrid employees, and trying to figure out how we all connect. We've got to adapt to that, and we'll continue to do that. Um, and so I think our communities, as well as just so many different things that we do. But what I often say is, um, our culture will adapt to our new environment, but our values don't change. So our value will always include putting people first. And that's really, we'll continue to evolve with our policies, procedures, and all of that to allow us to meet the needs of our associates and think forward to what the next group of associates and clients are going to want.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And being in the seat I'm in, heading up Total Rewards, I love that our leaders have been so supportive of other programs to help those that are in, say, the sandwich generation that you mentioned earlier. We've got Care Loop, caregiver support now. We have maybe maternity support. So it's all these different stages of life and really helping to provide those behind the scenes supports for not only career development, but then also helping on that home front, right? To make sure that if they want to progress, that they've got supports in all areas. So I feel so fortunate to be a part of a firm that believes truly in putting people first. So kind of in the same vein, Raymond has year over year been consistently recognized as the best CPA for women and also a best firm in equity leadership. So as the world of work and the priorities of the workforce continue to evolve and change, and you had mentioned obviously Raymond continuing to grow, how do you see Raymond evolving to be able to continue attracting, retaining a strong pipeline of diverse women leaders?
The first thing that's important as we continue to see women leaders moving into new positions. So we often hear that, it's hard to improve diversity in leadership when you don't see diversity above you. So I think that naturally, with seeing women, and I've been fortunate, I've been sponsored and coached and mentored. And I remember, when I joined Raymond back in 1996, that Heidi Bolger was the OMP of the Saginaw office. So and Kelly Bevo was here, and we have so many others that I've always been able to look up to and see in leadership positions. And obviously now we've expanded that. But, in terms of how we continue to grow in that, I'd go back to, we just continue to evolve and adjust with the needs of our associates and the needs of our clients. So in the current environment and, with responding to COVID, a lot of professions are saying that maybe they're going a step backwards in terms of women moving forward and career pathing, that it's, in terms of they're not seeing as many growth opportunities while balancing the hybrid or remote work environment. So we're aware of that and continuing to look for opportunities to make sure we're able to train and develop our associates and keep heading on the path that we have been with improving diversity, not only of gender, but ethnicity and all the different things that are covered in our DE&I efforts through our Diversity Action Council.
Before we wrap up today, are there any parting words that you'd want to share? Any last pieces of advice, or what would you want to leave us with today?
The only thing that I would add in addition to the relationships, I can't overstate the value of the relationships. And then the lean in, stretch yourself. But the last thing I would add, have fun. We all work too hard. We live crazy busy lives between navigating that work-life integration. And so make sure and have some fun along the way, however fun is defined for you. So we all work too hard and life is too short. So make sure and smile and have some fun along the way.
Well, Stacie, I just want to thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with me today. sharing your story, your insights, your secrets to success. I can say you truly are one of those unique individuals that empowers and puts people first every single day. And I can't say enough how lucky we are to have you leading our firm. So thank you again.
It is a true honor to lead this firm. So I couldn't be prouder and never dreamt that 27 years ago this would be my path. So thank you, and thanks for all that you do, and everybody else around the firm. So thanks
Thank
again.
you. Thank you.